let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome back. I'm James, and I'm going to be talking about hacker management part two. So, last time, last week, we spoke a lot about how you can work on the self and how you move forward with a lot of your things that way, whether it's on the technical side, whether you're trying to figure out, hey, your management role. Also, how to understand the different business side of it and how to make yourself better at where you can look at getting more experience and thinking along those lines. Today we're going to talk quickly about the team and how to make it this great dream team. Whether you're going to stay more technical and helping understanding a good team that you're in, or whether you're going into needing to maintain a team, or do you have to maintain a team of teams, or you have to have these very effective individuals and managers kind of running those things. So it should be pretty interesting. I know this is one of my favorite parts of it, and I think this has also got a lot of resonance over at HughesCon. So without any further ado, I'm going to be looking at the team. So how to build and maintain that dream team. So there's three things I'm going to be talking about today. First is the culture. Then we're going to be talking about the employee life cycle, which I think is very important. And then finally, investing in your team. So one of the things we heard all the time was that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is kind of like a mantra that you hear in writing about with business. And we heard a lot about this in my time at Harvard. All the time we hear this. And we really need to define what is the difference between kind of the culture side and the strategy side. So I like kind of giving the example. If we go back to our taco truck, which if you have the culture is you're working late nights, working with a group of people who are out drinking really late, and you decide to do a strategy where you change it up and you want to sell tacos in the morning for breakfast, right? That will perhaps not work out the best because you already have this culture, this late night culture. So moving the strategy won't work there. You'll have to first develop a culture for your team, which would allow for the strategy to work. The other things you usually think about with culture is the military is again one of these like things that you can easily think about, where you have this culture of can-do-ness, and you have this very kind of everyone has it looks and acts very similar in a very similar way. But you also see the cultures in a church group. You see it in the startup culture, and you can see a lot of those different things. So what do people kind of tolerate? And so if your strategy changes drastically from it, you're going to have a very difficult time. And it's going to be a lot easier to change your strategy to meet your culture than your culture to meet the strategy. And so when we're getting into employee life cycles, it's kind of like a 4-part thing that happens. So every single day, or every single time you have a new employee, they first arrive, so they get to the business and kind of start acclimating to the culture and all those different things. The second part is they kind of figure out which way they need to go, what they need to think about, and things along those ways. They finally understand everything they're supposed to know, and they start performing in their job, kind of what they need to be doing and what was pretty much in their job description. And eventually they reach this departure phase of where they'll be going on to another project or another position or perhaps even another company. And so understanding these different phases and what you should be looking at in these different phases is very, very important. Let's look back at, and then let's just walk through them again. So when you have an employee arriving at your company, this is going to be probably their best day there. They just got hopefully a new job that they're excited about to do. They came there for a reason. And as they're there, if you don't set that high expectation, if you don't have that standard there where you're letting them like have their computer on their first day, you have everything kind of, you greet them, you take them to lunch, all those different things, it's all going to go downhill from there. They'll always kind of remember your very first day. I know there's one time I came to a company and it took me a month to get a computer. That really set the tone of how that position worked for me and moving forward. So now that we like have the employee come in and we have set up that initial arrival part, let's talk about how you orient and you train them. So understanding of how they will perform their job functions, any additional training they'll need to do, and any additional things that they need to look after is kind of where this is. This again, military, we think along the lines of JQRs, but for the training and the expectation. So this is a good time for if there's special things they need to know or special accesses that take a little bit longer. This is kind of where it all gets kind of set up so they know exactly what they should be doing and how they'll be kind of evaluated moving forward. The performance phase is the longer one, and I think what everyone is very accustomed to. It's this what they're doing with their job description, how they're going about their roles, and what they're accomplishing every single day. The major parts to remember here is really that there needs to be feedback that is often and very transparent of, hey, if they're going the right way, if they're doing something wrong or anything along those lines. That allows them to, make sure they continue doing a great job. Now, the tricky one and one of the more difficult ones is obviously the departure. And so when the employee leaves to go somewhere else. So this makes managers very nervous. It makes employees very nervous when they have to tell their manager, hey, I'm going somewhere else. So let's kind of pick this apart again. I think the worst way you could have a departure of an employee would be them suddenly leaving without any notice, right? So suddenly the employee is gone basically the next day. There is a mad scramble to fix everything for the manager side of how do you feel what they were doing and all those different aspects. But it's also bad for the employee in a lot of ways because they don't get to leave with a good impression and different things along those lines. So what's a good departure look like? And I think the good departure is when it has been planned out. So all the responsibilities have been moved on. The employee hopefully has come back to the same company into a new position, a new exciting responsibility to do more great things there. That would be, the ideal. And so as a manager or as an employee or as an executive, you want to be watching to see how everyone moves through these steps and make sure that these are looked through so that you have this kind of cycle that looks more along the lines of almost a dance where they're kind of moving around in this. They arrive, they understand where they're going, they go back and perform their different roles, and they depart. And then they go around that entire ring around again. So what you might see is a brand new employee comes in as an intern. They arrive, they get trained up in their job, they perform their job excellently, they get hired on the next summer. They do it again. And then they graduate college and they come back in as another different position and they in the company. And then they go around again and then they pick up manager responsibilities. But then there might be a change up in this little dance of where they might actually even go to another company. And usually this is considered extremely unfortunate. This is usually considered a bad thing, the worst thing that can happen. But I would urge everyone to think about, all the good things that can come from this, right? Where perhaps the employee needs to understand some things that they weren't getting from before. So maybe they need to understand more about a different thing they're interested in, or they need to understand more of how the industry works or something along those lines. Think of these kind of rotations as a way to go out and discover more interesting things and kind of develop. And as you go in this cycle, I kind of think that there's all these people that I used to work with that I no longer work with that I constantly contact. It's not like they disappear. They've gone somewhere else. They've gone another really valuable skill that now I can leverage as a person. And I think that is really interesting to see of how that goes. So don't consider them dead to the world. Just consider, they just decided to go somewhere else for a little while. And hopefully it continues on where eventually they depart from whatever role they're in somewhere else, and they can come back and fill some exciting gaps at the company you're working for or the project you're working on. And it can do kind of go through the cycle again. So instead of the kind of this linear, they're going here, they're working a little bit, and they disappear forever. They have this nice little cycle that goes around and around and around that helps kind of develop them. And I think managing that aspect is something that companies that are really good at that, they kind of start being known as these people who develop people, or companies who develop employees into something very exciting, so that they're very useful somewhere else as well. So you can start thinking of some of the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are some of the ones that are very excited to kind of develop people, have them leave, and usually get them right back. And you have this good reputation with them because of how they manage their life cycle of their employees. And so I like usually also talking about Admiral Collingwood and his acorns that he always used. So not many people know who Admiral Collingwood is, but he was an admiral back with Admiral Nelson, British. So kind of during the Age of Sail, where the British, really their strategic advantage in the world was being able to go around and rule the seas, whether it's through trade or through also their navy. And so Admiral Collingwood would walk around and you'd have a handful of acorns, and he would go and plant these on his walks every single day. And he would be very diligent about doing this. And the purpose of this was so that one day these acorns would grow into gigantic trees, which would be used to make ships of the line. And so, which is kind of their, how you would be able to have ships that go out and do the naval combat and kind of be the best of the best, right? And so the thought behind this is what is fascinating, because these trees really take a long time to grow into something that's big enough to be used in like a ship of the line. And I think that in itself, like the amount of time it takes to go across that is fascinating. Now, we have to think somewhat along those lines. So instead of our strategic reserve being trees and lumber to build ships, we have to think of what that might be for us. And for us, I believe that raw resource is skill and talent. So how can we develop things so that if we need to draw from our talent pool, if we need to draw from these things, that we have that available for us? And it takes a lot of, it doesn't happen overnight. So building up this nice reserve of talent to get projects done is, I think, really important to do as an organization and to be considering as a manager. So it all kind of goes back to how we should be perhaps investing in people and the right way to be doing that. So the first thing I always kind of bring up is kind of the expected returns that you have from investing in people. And we don't always mean that the classic thing is getting a SAN certification or some training like that. And I think that's good, but and I think that's extremely necessary for lots of reasons. But we also have to really think outside the box. If you don't have budget for that, or if you are one of the technical people who is not in control of the budget, how can you help invest in the rest of your team? And this might be done through mentoring of individuals or through setting something up the correct way, where you have people learn skills that are very valuable. Some of the classic examples of this would be if you have someone brand new coming in, and you have another person kind of farther on in their life cycles, a technical person that he's really good at the web, let's say web testing, right? But he really wants to work into some like new 0-day stuff or look into some hardware hacking or something along those lines. So instead of, if although you have the business need for the web stuff, and you would have to figure out a way to buy them space to go study their new things. And so you kind of kill this with two birds with one stone. You kind of allow the senior employee to depart, and part of their departure might be orienting the new employee along the lines of how to do some of these interesting things. And that kind of training, that kind of investment, if it's done correctly, can help you move farther along the lines than just sending someone to a new class, right? Because now you have the consistency, the turnover, you have that rapport that the two are building together, and that investment is really, really important. Also, I see a lot of investment in technologies over people, and I think there's a cautionary tale here where technologies will change often, and it changes, I think, constantly. So if you have a choice between one person or getting technology that replaces one person, like one-on-one, almost always take the person, because you can invest in them and they can grow into something much bigger and much more beneficial in this like strategic reserve type of way, whereas you have diminishing returns with your technology as it has to be updated and everything along those lines. Obviously, if the technology takes the place of 4 or 5 people and is a lot cheaper, go back along those routes and think about it that way. But really be thinking about, if we don't invest in our people, you just start holding on to people who are not invested in, and they need to. It starts really killing that life cycle chain. The value you're viewed by potential employees of coming in, and kind of just destroys a lot of that. The other one is kind of the team versus personal needs. And I kind of talked about that a little bit, whereas if you have everyone has projects that they need. So if you are looking at certain things, obviously look to how you can do it the best way to meet your goals that are right there. But always be also aware that when you might have a day that you might have to ramp up something. So I think a classic thing nowadays is like some of the web technology type stuff, or the cloud technology, where you have people starting to learn AWS and Google Cloud and everything. So if you're an AWS shop, and there are some people who, I'm really more interested in Google Cloud instead, there might be still some potential in going and learning that, or having them go off on doing some of those things, because they would perhaps one day better understand that there might be a need for that, right? And so it's important to think about it kind of that way. And also, if you're responding to that and allowing that space into their life cycle, it allows them to feel that they're a valuable member of the team, and it helps the other people on the team realize, hey, we do value the different ideas and the contributions that other people have. And so it helps kind of, I believe, invigorate a lot of those things as a kind of way to meet both at the same time. The last thing I usually talk about is how we have the right sizing. So just the right size of a team. There's often this mentality of, hey, we need more people now. And that's a trap in a lot of ways. As you get more people, as you start growing out your group, usually you get additional tasks, chores, and stuff you have to work on, right? And it's usually on a 3, 4, or 5 to 1 ratio. So if you get one new person, you get 5 people's worth of work coming in with that person normally. And especially kind of grows out of proportion as the team gets bigger and bigger. I would suggest trying to keep it smaller and trying to wait until the very last second to hire, kind of get that new person to be brought on. It's much easier to say with a team of 5 people that, hey, I can't take on new work because we're busy, and show where that is, as opposed to having a team of 30 people and saying, no, we're too busy, we can't sneak out that last little bit. So in that regard, be very careful about making your team way too big, way too fat, way too early. And try to make sure you grow as slowly as you can while meeting all of your goals, and do it extremely smartly. That being said, of course, if you have metrics backing it up, if you have data backing up that, hey, we need to do these different things, these fit into the life cycles of everyone so that we can, have good developed leaders of the different groups. We have good technical skills for this, and we understand the business needs. If we can do that, then that's the time to grow, to add more people and do additional great things. So that's kind of the overview discussion I have about the team. So let's again walk across the different types of people and what you really I would like to be taken away from this. So if you're that technical person or really just digging down into it, really be thinking about what the culture is like for you and for the individual people, and make sure you are pushing that culture. So if it is really important for someone to be technical, you also have to be very technical and set that example. I think that's fairly obvious, but it's always worth repeating again. Also understand how the team operates in the life cycle so that you can start saying okay, well, I need to do this on my next rotation. I need to be doing that. And this guy is rolling off into a different position, so maybe I can do some cross training there. So you can be proactive at understanding every single step of that life cycle. If you're getting bored, burned out, those types of things, speaking with your manager and making sure you have that open dialogue allows them to help you out in their transition and movement to the next best thing for you, whether it's within the company, a new technical specialty, or with another company entirely. And make sure there's investment in people. And this is just as much on you as it is on everyone else. Make sure you're going around training people and what you feel should be done. And then advocate for SANS, advocate for going to a lot of the conferences around, so that you have that wide base to kind of grow from, and you're able to get everything you're supposed to get as well. Then also for the middle manager kind of, as you're taking in these things, understand how culture might interfere with your goals. If your culture is vastly different, try to reshape which way the strategy is going, and be that sanity check to make sure there's not that problem of how, like our example before, where we have late night workers who are trying to wake up really early in the morning to do to serve breakfast tacos. If you don't have that good fit, you might cause some problems. Refresh an employee's life cycle. So as we were talking about going through those different things, be very cognizant of when, hey, they've been performing this is not what they want to be doing. It's time to move on to something else. It's time to see something else, and I need this new skill down the road or something like that. If you're cognizant of that and you can kind of chain all these things together, I think that's when the real magic happens, where you really have a company, you're viewed as a great manager because you're developing your people, everyone's getting training, everyone is very happy with their work, and you're getting all the business objectives done. So if you can manage that, I think that is a lot of the secret sauce. And then wisely invest in people. So if you are in a position where you're hiring people, be very careful before you do, and work and spend lots of time hiring that person. Also, make sure you're spending things where you should be spending. If it's really difficult sometimes to go back and say, hey, I need a budget for X number of dollars, and then the value is not seen. So make sure when there is these different when people come to you with these different ideas, what they should be spending on, and how you can communicate with the executives of where it's good and where it's bad. And then for the executives, really, I really advise you to dive down into the trenches. So one of the problems I have had before is not being around kind of the line workers, or my example is I was away from the sailors too long, and I wasn't understanding their day-to-day lives. And I was trying to push strategy, which really deviated vastly differently from kind of their kind of subculture that they had. And when I found that out, and all it really took was me sitting down with them in their area and kind of being with them and understanding what they're doing. So as I understood the culture better, and I could change it a little bit to fit kind of the strategy we're looking at in the future, and then also I was able to adjust strategy a little bit as well. Understand the skill gaps that the business needs. So as you are more interactive with the business, understand, hey, we need this thing coming up soon, and then you can start prying and prodding, like, oh, do we have these people who are interested in whatever in this different area? We're trying to expand out into Australia or South Africa or wherever. Do we have people who are interested in that? And then so that you can match up some of these life cycle goals with the employees and give that lead time so that that can be well planned out, as opposed to a big surprise. And also work really well on succession planning, of making sure there's always something, so that life cycle management understand where someone would be able to step in if suddenly someone's life cycle didn't go as planned. Someone had to quickly leave because a spouse was going somewhere else,